You are listening to the Primitive Intelligence Podcast, episode 408. It's a bird. Is that a triangle? A UFO conspiracy. There are a lot of different UFO conspiracies, out there. I want to touch on the triangle UFOs because the area I grew up in had a fairly significant amount of reportings of these triangles, including one from myself. I saw one of these things. So I want to talk about these. May touch on other UFO conspiracies in future episodes, but we're going to go with this one for right now. If you're watching on the YouTube video, you may notice this is the same microphone. I've been tweaking the podcast setup for this whole season, just trying different things, different levels, different setups, just trying to get the best sound as I can. And I had been using a pop filter, if you're watching the videos right here, that just set up in front of the microphone, but it was constantly in my way. It had that arm, that gooseneck arm that came around, and it was blocking me from seeing the screen. I had to keep on looking around it. So I went and I got my dead cat for my Rode microphone that I used to use for my DSLR, and this works really good. And it just keeps when I'm saying my P's and stuff like that, or blowing or breathing, it just keeps that from hitting the microphone. So this is working pretty well. And it gives me a good, clear field of view. I don't know why I'm even telling you about that. If you're listening to this on the podcast, if you're just listening to the audio, you don't really care. So without further ado, episode 408 of the Primitive Intelligence Podcast starts now. So what are flying triangles? If you're not aware, these are large, black or dark colored triangles that people see flying in the skies. And a lot of times these are kind of weird sightings because in a lot of cases they show up in very populated areas, along highways, over towns, in cities, near military bases, which is kind of key. And like I said, the area I grew up in had a fairly high number of people who said they saw these. A lot of the stories were from when I was really young, and I don't remember who said them. I just hear people talk about they saw this triangle flying in the sky. And to a certain extent, you take that with a grain of salt when you hear people talking about it. So I've got 4 stories here about sightings in the area I grew up in. I grew up in a town called Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, and it's in Wayne County. And people, not right in Newfoundland, but in the general area, reported seeing these things quite often. Not like going, I don't know if they've ever been reported to MUFON or anything like that, but you hear people talk about them. And I've always noticed that if you spend enough time outside, and when you grow up in a small town like Newfoundland, you spend a lot of time outside, you tend to see some weird things. You have some experiences, and whether they're explainable or not, I guess it depends on your point of view. In these stories, I'm going to change names. I may change a couple like location details and things like that. Just not everybody wants to talk about these things. So this is the first. The first story is actually 2 reports. So same friend of mine. When we were younger, he woke up one morning thinking that he was late for school or maybe to work on the farm he lived on with his grandparents. He heard something outside. Something woke him up. And he saw lights coming in his window. So he thought it was really early and he was late for something, or somebody was trying to steal something. And when he looked out, he saw lights out like over the field, a couple hundred yards from his house. And he just thought it was weird. And he went back to sleep, which was even weirder because it didn't faze him at all. So a few years later, the town I lived in was down in a valley. I lived up on the hill on one side of the valley. He lived up on the hill on the opposite side of the valley. And he saw a light out in the distance, like looking back towards my house. And he thought it was the moon at first. Then he realized the moon was behind him. And then he kind of watched this light, thinking it was a helicopter, move closer, like it was out over the next town, away from us, which is Gouldsboro. And it was like out that direction. And then it moved in, and it looked like maybe it was over Newfoundland. And he thought maybe it's a medevac helicopter or something that's moving really fast. But then it kind of hovered, and he thought maybe they're like doing search and rescue. It stayed there for a few seconds. It moved closer to him, to like the field, like the next farm over. He couldn't really make out a shape, but he just saw this thing hovering there. And he thought, man, this thing is really fast. This helicopter is really fast, but he couldn't hear it yet. And it stayed there for like 15 or 20 seconds. And then he said it came right over his head. And like past him and went to the field behind his house, and he could see it. He could clearly see it when it went over him, and it was this giant triangle. And he didn't really give me a good description of it, just it was a triangle, it had some lights on it. But he said it didn't make a sound. It moved over him. It went over the field. It kind of hovered there, and you could see it kind of rocking back and forth slowly, and then it was also kind of twisting a little bit. Not much, not like it was rotating, but it was kind of twisting back and forth, and it was hovering. Like it wasn't just like stationary there. And it stayed there for like maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and it just took off, and it didn't make a sound. And when he told me that, we kind of thought back to that story he had when we were younger and wondered if they were related. So the next sighting story in that area was a friend of mine staying over. I was in my 20s, early 20s, and woke up to them telling me I just saw a triangle fly over. And I'm like half asleep still. So I'm thinking they were dreaming, or they thought they saw, like in the house, a triangle fly over. And the next day it was kind of mentioned that no, like over the house, like outside, must have been looking out the window or been able to see out the window and just saw it fly over in the opening between the house and the trees and saw this triangle fly over. And at that point, I didn't put the two stories together. I'd heard other people in the area talk about seeing these triangles and didn't really give it a whole lot of thought. It was interesting, but I never really like went out looking for them. A few years after that, me and another friend at that same property. So in the back, it used to be an old farm. So back in the 50s or 60s, the state came in and put in a series of flood control dams to help out with the rain from hurricanes that were passing through. And there was this big depression in the property. And him and I would go out. We'd either go back there or go over to, there's a couple spots like down by his house where we weren't astronomers by any stretch of imagination, but we both had telescopes. We had, binoculars. We like to just go out and look at the sky. And then we wouldn't go out there and get drunk, but we'd just, go out with like a couple coffees and just hang out and BS, shoot the shit and, look at the sky. So the one particular night we see like through the trees fly right over my house, this giant triangle. And it was like, we were seeing it from the side, but from a little bit underneath too, because we were down in that depression. We're maybe 15 feet below the level the house is on. And we could see it for probably a good 15 seconds. And it just slowly and quietly didn't make a sound, just flew in one direction. It didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't do anything weird, except for just be there. That's weird enough. What happened after that, though, was the weirdest thing. So we saw it for about 15 seconds. As soon as it got out of our field of view, I turned to him and I said, "Tell me exactly what you just saw." And he described seeing a triangle. But what he described was slightly different from what I saw. And not just like little things, but like the placement of the lights on it. And he saw windows. And I had my binoculars with me, so I was actually able to like zoom in on this thing and look at it. I didn't see any windows. He clearly saw windows. The configuration of the lights were slightly different. And we had just seen this. This started getting me thinking about what exactly we're seeing, what other people are seeing. So over the years, now that was back in the late 90s. And since then, there's been a lot of stories. A lot of people have talked about seeing these triangles. And when I see stories with multiple witnesses, now, of course, as I'm doing my research, I can't find any of these stories anymore online. They're just buried, or you got to it's like a paywall to get into them. But I remember seeing a lot of stories where there are multiple witnesses. They'd see these things going through, over a town, along a highway, and everybody they talked to would have a slightly different description of what they were seeing. How can that possibly be? If you're seeing the same thing, how can you see something completely different? With those stories in mind, what are these things? What are people seeing? There's a lot of reports of these triangles. There's also, let me bring up on the computer here. I found a couple of sites here, right? Things about, like one's from history.com talking about the truth behind the triangles and what's actually the name of the article. Huge hovering and silent, the mystery of black triangle UFOs. This is from history.com. They're kind of non-committal about what they're saying. People have seen them. People are reporting them. They're seeing different things, how they exceed the limits of conventional aircraft, and then what they could be. And we'll talk about that in a second, what they could be. Another article here, this is from the Huffington Post. Now, this one seems a little disjointed, but it kind of fits in to what happened to me and my friend, where we saw something slightly different. This says witnesses 1,200 miles apart describe the same giant triangle UFO. Now, I've read this article, and it's not the same. They don't see the same thing. They don't see anything close. Now, what we saw was very similar to each other, but just slightly different. One person here sees a dark-colored triangle-shaped UFO hovering over power lines. And then 1,200 miles away, 2 hours later, somebody sees a brightly lit, large triangular object span the horizon from the sky from horizon to horizon in a couple seconds. They don't really match description-wise, just that they were both triangles. Next up, from space.com, there's an article called Silent Running, Black Triangle Sightings on the Rise, and it's from 2004, September 2004. What they show this illustration of this craft. It's not a triangle. It's got 6 sides on it. Not even close to what I saw. And it's got multicolored lights on it. It's got like white and red and blue lights on it. 6 sides. It's completely different looking. But basically, this is talking about between 1990 and when this article was written, there was an increase in these sightings. And there was a lot of people reported seeing triangles of some kind. Some of them kind of strange. This one woman says she saw one. It had to be about 500 feet in altitude, and it completely encompassed her field of vision. That's humongous. That is humongous. But when I talk about what I want to talk about with what these things could be, it may make a little more sense. They also go on to talk about what they could be as well, as far as, terrestrial craft, stealth aircraft, things like that. Again, going to talk about that in a second. And then the last article I have here is from Business Insider. Now, I don't know how legit this is, but basically it says the Pentagon confirmed that a video showing a triangular UFO is real and taken by the U.S. Navy. This was April 16, 2021. And it immediately shows a picture here of a screen grab of this video, and it's just a triangle, right? Down at the bottom, there's a clip maybe halfway down, there's a clip from the Twitter feed that this was posted on. And it looks like it comes from like a green lens scope camera. And it shows 3 different objects. And one of them it's more like a pyramid, the way it looks like it's flying. It could just be the angle it's at. But this is a night scope, so it looks bright, but the whole thing is kind of pulsing. And it's only on screen for a couple seconds. But what they're saying here is that the Pentagon, this is Pentagon spokesperson Sue Gough, Gough, said in a statement shared with Insider that 3 other still images that have been circulating are also genuine. Quote, the photographs and videos, what the Mystery Wire article refers to as sphere, acorn, and metallic blimp, and the videos in the Extraordinary Beliefs article were taken by Navy personnel, Gough said. So doing a quick search on that quote, I've found a couple other articles talking about the same thing. Pentagon confirms pyramid UFO. Video and other photos were taken by the Navy. This is by Washington Examiner. The fact that the government is kind of admitting that these things are out there and they don't know what they are, or do they? Do we know? Will we know? So let's talk about what they could be. A lot of people see these things and it automatically jump to it's aliens. To UFOs from another planet, another galaxy, somewhere far, far away. And they're here visiting, or they're stealing stuff from us, or they're collecting people for food, or they're doing something, which is a possibility. Maybe they're not from here. Maybe it's from a parallel dimension. We don't know, right? It could be. There may be a simpler answer, though. They may be Earth-made, human-made craft that we just don't know about yet. And a couple of these articles talk about this, that they could be, top secret spy planes or something like that. The space.com article basically talks about how when the stealth fighter, the F-117, and the stealth bomber, the B-2, were being tested, it was very low key. There was a few sightings, People saw them every once in a while, but not like this. Now, remember, this one was written back in 2004. The difference with this is, and some people just automatically jump to, oh, you saw a triangle, it was a stealth bomber. I've seen stealth bombers. I've seen them with my own eyes. I've seen them at air shows. I've seen them fly over. I know what they look like. They got like a sharp edge to them around the sides. They're kind of shaped like a bird, right? I think like a kestrel is what they base the body shape off of when you're looking at it from the side. And they are triangular in shape, but the trailing end, the rear of a stealth bomber is very jagged, very cut in and thin. What I saw was not thin. It was a thick, almost squared off corners kind of a triangle. And if you can see the episode art in the player you're using, what I depicted in that is similar to what I saw. If you can't see that, come over to primitiveintelligence.com and go to the show notes for 408. You'll see it in there. I know what I saw wasn't a stealth bomber, and there's a couple reasons why. I'll get into that after we talk about what they could be. So people say, oh, it's stealth bomber or stealth fighter. The history.com article, where in the section that says the truth about the triangles, it shows a picture of an F-117 through a night vision lens from 1999. And it's very delta shaped. So it's not really a triangle. It's very wedge shaped. It's got the point, and at the back, it still kind of comes in a little bit. It's not a true triangle. But again, there's reasons why they're not these things. And I've seen stealth fighters too. And from directly underneath, yeah, it looks like a triangle. But once you get away from it and you see it from any other angle, you can clearly see it's not a triangle. So yeah, could it be some unclassified, still secret government or military craft? I think that's very possible. I think that's probably the most likely scenario. Why they got them out and about and just letting people see them all the time, I don't know. But it is the most logical answer. The government is coming around to the idea, or at least admitting to the idea, that there are UFOs. They won't call them UFOs. They call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. It's the same thing, though. And you're starting to see a little more evidence given to that. The Navy has released some videos, or I don't know if they did it on purpose or somebody released some Navy videos, a few different Navy videos of UFOs and UAPs. And the government's like, we don't know what they are. We know that they're probably not ours, but we don't know where they're from. I did see one article where they said that they're not ruling out the possibility of visitors from space. Again, is it possible, I think, to believe that we are the only intelligent life in the entire universe, let alone just the galaxy, but an entire universe, that we don't even quite know how big it is or what it is, to think that we are the only intelligent life that would be, we're not capable of going to other planets, but is it possible that someone else could be? Sure. Is it probable? I would say no. I would have to say it's not probable, but it's possible. So what else could it be? If it's not aliens and it's not military craft, what else could it be? Because I don't think that if it were military craft, it could be a conspiracy, right? We know, and I would hope that most people understand, that in order for us to stay safe, the military has to have technology. And if we tell everybody what we have before we perfect it, then everybody's going to have it, right? So there's got to be a level of secrecy. That's not a conspiracy. That's just that's protecting what you're going to use to protect your people. Not a conspiracy. But if it is aliens or extra dimension, maybe it's us from the future. Who knows? If it is something like that, and someone knows and you're not telling us for whatever reason, then that could be a conspiracy. So what else could it be? Could it be a third option, that maybe there was nothing there to begin with, and here's where you start going into a conspiracy? Project MK Ultra was a program undertaken by the CIA in a effort to use mind control. There's a lot of documentation about it. I'm not going to get too much into the MK Ultra, but we know that this is something that not just the U.S., but other countries as well were looking into. If you could use mind control against your enemy instead of weapons, that's much better, right? You don't have to fire a shot. There's no chance of you getting hurt in an all-out war if you can just control the minds of your enemy. Now, MK Ultra is purported to have done tests on civilians to see if they could, if their techniques worked. So if that is something that was being looked into back in the 50s and 60s, is it possible that what people are seeing with these flying triangles, because they tend to defy physics, right? Which makes it seem very alien. I can tell you from the sighting that I had, where I was standing, the amount of open sky that I could see. And if I think back on it, we saw it for about 15 seconds. And it could have only covered about 500 to 600 feet, maybe. Maximum 500 to 600 feet. That puts its airspeed, because of the angle we're at, you kind of tell where it was, unless it was absolutely humongous and very far away, which it didn't appear to be. It seemed like it was maybe, I don't know, 40 to 50 feet over the tree line, over basically my house. So we saw it cover about 500 to 600 feet in about 15 seconds. That puts it around 25 to 30 miles per hour. That was moving, not making a sound. Now, if you want to say it was a stealth bomber or stealth fighter, that's a really neat trick for a jet or a bomber to pull off, to fly at 25 to 30 miles per hour level, not at an angle. There was no hard wind coming in that could use for lift. I don't think that either one of those aircraft can fly at that low of a speed. I think like their minimum approach speed on a bomber is something like 140 or 150 miles per hour as it's coming in. Anything lower than that, and you've got to start doing some acrobatics with those to get them to stay in the air. And you hear them. Yeah, they're stealth, but they still make a noise. The jet engines still make sound. So we didn't hear anything. It was level. It was absolutely level. It wasn't pitched back. It wasn't pitched forward. It didn't tip to either side. It just stayed level, moving at about 25 to 30 miles an hour. The one my friend saw, I mean, it moved rapidly from spot to spot, and then it would hover. I don't know of any aircraft that can do that. But what if it's not? Maybe what if that's not what you're actually seeing? So let's take MK Ultra and plug that into this equation. And let's say that you're trying to test some new kind of mind control. And not so much to make people do things, but to make people think they're seeing something. So you can't make it too complicated. You can't put out this huge string of commands like you're going to see this thing, this specific thing. It's going to do this specific act. It's going to do this. But what if you only had to put out flying triangle? That's the only incentive you put out there. The only command you put out there. Flying triangle. And you let the mind of the observer, of the intended target, to fill in the blanks. So me and my friend are standing there. We see it. We see something slightly different because our ideas of what we would see as a flying triangle are slightly different. When you have mass sightings of these things, and some people say it was just a dark triangle. Some people say it had lights on the side. Some people had lights on the bottom. Some people say it was round. Some people say it looked like it had a house on the top. You could see a dome. You could see windows. You could see people. You get all these different varying reports of the same sighting. If you're only giving people the idea that they're going to see a triangle or they're going to see a UFO, and you let their brains fill in the rest, those sightings will be different. Immediately discredits the sighting. Maybe there's something there. Maybe what you're seeing is a blimp flying by, and that blimp is putting out this signal that on a frequency that your brain can pick up on, and it says, this isn't a blimp, this is a triangle. Let your brain do the rest. That way, the sightings, it's the perfect stealth. Think about that. It's the perfect stealth because Nobody knows what they saw. And if you can have a fighter jet that can do that, and that fighter jet can just put out the idea, it's already stealth from radar, and it could put out the idea, you see nothing, or you see a flock of birds, or you see a T-Rex flying through the sky, and people are just absolutely baffled by what they're seeing, you're going to take people by surprise. I think that's a very interesting concept. And when you put the pieces together as some of these reports, it almost seems like that could actually be the case. That there is no flying triangle. There's whatever this device is, whatever this craft is. Or maybe there's not even a craft there. Maybe they can beam this down from a satellite and get you to think you see things. And they just have to pick a path and see who bites. That would be one hell of a weapon. And if they can use it as a weapon, what else can it be used for? And I think that is a very disturbing conspiracy. Now, I've looked around. I haven't seen anybody tie that together in any of the reports I've read. I'm not saying that other people haven't, but I haven't seen it. So let me know what your thoughts are on that. So imagine the implications of a weapon like that. You could target, say we're at war, and we target one area and make them think they see jets flying in or soldiers on the horizon. And there's nothing actually there. And our troops are actually in another spot. And where they're going, they're being told, you see nothing. Or you see a herd of deer. So the military rolls to where there's reports of soldiers and they're actually moving away from the actual attack. Very sci-fi. Very out there. But again, I know that what I saw was slightly different than what my buddy saw, and we were standing a foot apart from each other. We saw the exact same. We were in the same place at the same time, viewing something that we both viewed slightly differently. This one's weird. It probably goes a lot deeper than that, and the actual answer is probably something completely different. Now, the more disturbing part of that is if it's not ours and this same thing is happening. If this is an extraterrestrial craft and it can do the same thing, that's unnerving. Because, I have heard reports where people say, sometimes you look up and it's a blue sky and there's just one cloud. That's a UFO. It's in disguise. It's in stealth mode. What if it is? What if that's not a cloud at all? And you're just, the thought in your is being sent to you that you see a cloud. Is that why sometimes you look at a cloud and you think you see an elephant, somebody else looks at it and they don't see it? That'd be creepy. I'm going to continue to keep my eye out on these triangle UFOs just because they fascinate me, because I did see a triangle something. I don't know what it was. I don't like to speculate on what it was. If anything, now there is a military base not far from where I grew up. It's not an air base. It's an army base, and they deal in electronics. I don't know if it came from there. Maybe it was keeping an eye on that base. I don't know. There's not a lot of, as far as I know. Although I will say this, that base, it's called Toby Hanna Army Depot. When I was a kid, we went there at school, and there's like a whole crazy underground complex in that place. Like what you see on the above is only one thing. It's a crazy spot. But as far as I know, nothing top secret goes on there. Maybe it's really well hidden top secret. That's why we don't know. But could it be something that was keeping an eye on that, was looking at the base? Could have been from the base, maybe. I don't know. Let me know what you think about this one. Drop me a line at podcast@primitiveintelligence.com or go over to theprimitiveintelligence.com and go to the contact page. This could go all kinds of ways. And the UFO stories, there are many of them. So is there another UFO story you guys want to hear? Let me know. Drop me a line. Let me know if you want to hear other ones. As I'm recording this, I'm looking at the camera feed there, and I can see that the dead cat on my microphone and my beard pretty much match now. Getting gray, getting white, getting old. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope it makes you think more. There's no tie to team sports theory in this one. Not that I can find. That's been your Primitive Intelligence podcast for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will talk to you in the next episode.